Thank you, Dennis. My name is David G. I'm grateful, recovering alcoholic, lustaholic. I do have a recovery date in both programs, AA of August of 1994 and SA of October 2019. Really grateful to be here. God, we've been coming out for quite a while now. We were just talking about that before the meeting, how this is about 18 weeks now, and I just really appreciate you guys coming out. It's really tremendously helped me in my recovery, and I'm so grateful for that. We've been journeying through the big book and going through each step pretty carefully and taking a close look at how it was originally written. The work that I have done in the big book up to this point has really been life-changing for me. I had several good men in my life that has guided me through the years with the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous in AA. However, I did suffer from the disease of sexaholism. Lust chased me for more than 25 years and won out every time. And I would come through the book and I would try to work the steps and I would try to get through it. And I just could never, for some reason, overcome lust. I relapsed for more than 25 years trying to get sober with that. October of last year was not my first trip to SA. I had been here before. I'd relapsed and was out again for a year and then ended up hitting the bottom. That was pretty nasty, pretty ugly, and involved a lot of hurt to a lot of people. Coming back to SA, one of the things that I knew that I was going to have to do was work the steps in the order as they were written. I didn't know what you guys had over here, what the steps look like over here. I was very relieved to come over here and find out that you guys use the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to recover. Now, I used some other literature as well to help me because of the beast I was dealing with, lust. But, the one thing was for sure, I was very, very grateful that I had the opportunity to get back into the big book and come through this work again. And that's exactly what I did. When I got to amends, I seen that there were a whole lot of amends that I had left behind through the years in AA that I had not been willing to make. I'd never practiced steps 10 and 11 on a daily basis. Now, I worked with a lot of others, and I think that's the only thing that saved me from ever returning back to drugs and alcohol through the years. In fact, I'm sure of it because getting into the fourth and fifth step with a sponsor and taking a close look at that, the one thing that I never failed to do was always reach out to others and try to help them to work the steps through the book. And today I can do that and feel clean within all the way around. And man, that's a beautiful thing. It really is. So I'm grateful to be here to share my experience in this part of the book. There again, and I say it every week, I'm not an expert here. I'm not a doctor, and I'm definitely not very many people on here sponsors. So if there is something you see that you disagree with or your sponsor tells you something different, your sponsor is right. I feel you should listen to him and not me. However, this is my experience as I went through this book. And there are things that we take a close look at and we pick apart and we look at pretty closely. And there's a few of my guys that are on the call today, and they can tell you absolutely this is the way that we go through the big book. I don't hold back on that from day one. We talk about, we're going to stick to the letter of the book as close as possible, and we're going to go through it to have an experience. So today we're in the amends, and we're on page 78, and we're at the bottom paragraph. We took a look at this last week, and I shared some experiences of some amends that I had done along the way. And I'll do that as well this week, and we'll take a look at the book, and we'll just kind of break it down and see where it goes. So with all that being said, I want to, there again, take a look at page 78, bottom paragraph, where he says, perhaps we have committed a criminal offense which might land us in jail. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I have committed a lot of criminal offenses in my life prior to coming into AA. And I committed a few of them after being in there as well. I went to jail 2 years sober for putting my hands on a young lady that I should have never done. I had to go to jail for that. It's something that I had to own up to, face. And, thankfully, I had to go through some of the court system stuff. In fact, they had assigned me to a counselor. And we got together, and my ego was so big that I started telling him all about the big book and how it worked and how wonderful it was. And he was ready to put me into school and have me to help him be his partner. And that's how big the alcoholic, sexaholic ego is. I go in there for counseling, or I should be going in there to get better from the anger that and I want his job. I want to take over what he's doing. And so anyway, the book says, perhaps that's happened to some of us. If it were known to the authorities, We may be short in our accounts and unable to make good. Now, we've already admitted this in confidence to another person. Remember, in our fifth step, we took a close look at that. We admitted in confidence to another person, one person, not several persons or not a whole group. We sit down with one other person and we admitted a lot of these things in confidence. Now, there are some things that I would definitely not sit in a meeting of SA or AA and tell everybody. But when I get with another man, this is something that I have to get out of me. He says, we are sure that we would be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. Maybe it's only a petty offense, such as padding the expense account. I talked about that last week. Being sober many years into the AA program, I was given a job with an unlimited credit card, and, I really took a lot of advantage of that. That's the one of men that I do have left on my list. Thousands of dollars there that we're taking advantage of. And a lot of people have told me, David, that's something that, if you go and do that, there's a chance that you can go to jail over that. And if you do that, you're going to put your family in harm's way because you're going to be out of the way and you're not going to be able to provide for them. So I think that you should take a close look at this prior to making that amends, because there's a couple of times that I've been ready, but fear has always beat me back on that every time. And that amends shows up every time that I go through the work, every time. So I do want to take my family and others into consideration, but at the same time, I don't want to miss this amends because my ego has me afraid to go make it. So looking at what we're about to look at is the reason that I have not made it. There again, I talked to a man that I respect very much in the program. He told me I should donate money to this charity and that charity and do other things. But I want to listen intuitively what's going on the inside of me, and I don't feel clear there. So that amends has not been made. It said most of us has done that sort of thing. Maybe we're divorced and remarried, but haven't kept up the alimony to number one. She's indignant about it and has a warrant out for arrest. That's a common form of trouble too. That happened to me when I was in treatment the last time in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had hid in the mountains with a bunch of full-blood Indians, and we were ceremonies and life was wonderful, this and that. But reality come back one day, and this woman was pretty upset, and she wanted some money, and I didn't have any. But the good news is, she did find out what I was doing, and we were able to end up working that out, and it turned out to be a really good amends that I made to her. And my children were involved, and we ended up losing one. He drowned when I was 9 months sober in AA, and that just pretty much it drew us closer together, and we were able to work all of this out. So, the amends is so powerful. It really is. It's healing. It's forgiving. People tell us in here at times, or I've heard people say, you should never say you're sorry in the amends and you should never ask for forgiveness. But, the book says something quite different. So opinion don't mean a whole lot to me. The fact of this does. He says, although these reparations take innumerable forms, there are some general principles which we find guiding. Reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience. So if you remember in step one, that was one thing that we really took a close look at. Am I willing to go to any lengths to find recovery from this? And most of us say, yeah, of course we are, but we don't realize all the work that's going to be ahead for us to do. So here's my direction and my prayer. I ask that I be given the strength and direction to do the right thing no matter what the personal consequences may be. And that's the one reason I haven't been able to make that amends. That's the one reason I haven't been able to go to donate to the other charities and skip over this deal. I really don't feel that these men are going to put me in jail if I go to them. They don't even know that I had taken that money from them. That's been 10 years ago. And I'm quite sure if a man was sitting across from me 10 years later saying, I took this money, I'm here to pay you back, how can I do that? I don't believe I'd lock him up. I really don't. But the ego is so powerful and fear is very real whenever it comes to these amends. So we really need to be in a good place. We need to consult our sponsor, our families. This isn't just about me. There's a whole lot of people involved here. It says we may lose our position, our reputation, or face jail, but we must be willing. We have to. Now, we were talking a little bit earlier, and I know that in SA, there are certain things that we cannot go and tell that we have done and probably should not. It says, except when to do so would injure them or others. And there's a whole lot of other people that could be harmed over such a confession. So I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that the book says we must not shrink at anything. And the reason why is because I want that clean slate with my Creator. I want to recover here, not just be sober. Usually, however, other people are involved, my wife, my family, their family. I mean, it's just on and on and on. Therefore, we are not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. I did that a lot before I got into recovery. He's going to give us an example here, and let's take a look at this. We know a man who had remarried, and because of resentment and drinking, and look at how he writes that. Look at how Bill writes that, resentment and drinking. Resentment always comes first, then drinking, and that's what he says. And for us, lusting and acting out, resentment will always come first, then the lusting and acting out, drinking, whatever you want to call it, will come next. He had not paid alimony to his first wife. She was furious. She went to the court, got an order for his arrest. Now, he had commenced our way of life, and that tells me he was sober. He had secured a position, got a job. He was doing better. He was getting his head above water. And it would have been impressive heroics. And that's the one thing my sponsor had me to write in very big letters above those two words, avoid. David, you avoid ever trying to be impressive heroics to anyone, because that's a big part of your illness. And if you're doing that, then you're in your ego and you're in trouble. They said it would have been impressive heroics if he had walked up to the judge and said, here I am. We thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary, but, and this changes that whole sentence, but if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for either family. Well, here's what they suggested he do. Write the first wife, admitting his faults, and asking forgiveness. So when they say, no, we should never say we're sorry, we should never say ask for forgiveness, the book doesn't say that. If you remember over on page 78, down just before the last paragraph, a few sentences up there, it says, arranging the best deal that we can. We let these people know we're sorry. Over here it says, we admit our faults and ask forgiveness. So we absolutely do both. Well, this fella did that. He also sent a small amount of money. He told her what he'd try to do in the future. He said he was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. Of course, she did not, and the whole thing has long since been adjusted. Now, here's a direction that I really want to pay close attention to when making amends. Before taking drastic action, which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. Now, that's a direction. If I'm going to take drastic action and make an amends, before I would pull anybody into that, I need to talk to that person and find out if that's okay. Now, if I've obtained permission and I have consulted with others, such as my sponsor, prayer, talk to my wife, ask God to help, the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink. Man, what a beautiful outcome this is going to be if we do it the way it's written here. This brings to mind the story of one of our friends while drinking. He accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival. Giving him no receipt for it, he subsequently denied having received the money. He used the incident as a basis for discrediting the man. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, the rival was ruined. And that definitely sounds like me. We talked about that last week. I gave an example of a little uncle that I had taken advantage of for a lot of money, and had beat him out of that money. I had him beat out of that money. He could have never touched me on that because I filed bankruptcy at one time in my life. I put him down as one of the creditors. He could have never come back on me with that. But in going through this work, we develop a consciousness. And whenever we do that, it begins to speak to us. And it did me. So the fact of the matter is that, I've had to face this amends. I've had to make this amends. The book says this man felt he had done it wrong. He could not possibly make right. And see, that's what it is. It's more about making right the wrong than me going to him telling him I'm sorry. If he opened the old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away the means of his livelihood. What right had he to involve those dependent upon him? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? In other words, face the blame. Well, let's look what happened. After consulting with his wife and his partner, now remember that was the direction we looked at the top of the page before taking drastic action. He came to the conclusion that it was better to take those risks than to stand before his Creator guilty of such ruinous slander. That's what he thought. Not all of us think that way. He saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking, lusting, acting out again, whatever the case may be, and it'd all be lost anyhow. Look at what he did. He attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up, made an explanation. His action met widespread approval, and today he's one of the most trusted citizens of the town. That happened years ago. For me, I don't think that I want to do that. I don't believe I want to go to the church and stand up after the sermon and make a public statement in front of everybody. That's me. That's not him. The amends that I have made, I've really never asked a lot of people to be there or anything like that. I can remember in the very beginning, I asked a man, would he go with me to make the amends? And it was to a lady that I'd taken advantage of. And, he told me, he said, if you would have invited me to go with you when you took advantage of her, yeah, I might have done that. But now, no. And so, of course, he was being smart about it, but, it's the truth. These are things that we have to face up to ourselves. Well, here comes a section of the book that most of us are definitely guilty of and probably owe some amends there. I don't know about you, but I sure know that I had a long list. It says the chances are that we have domestic troubles, and I did. Perhaps we were mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised, and I was. Now, we doubt if in this respect, alcoholics or sexaholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if we're much worse than other people or not. The chance, the deal is I'm going to have to do something about this, or I'm never going to get sober. But drinking does complicate sex relations in the home, and it does. Because I'm very selfish in that area of my life. I'm very attentive when I want to be and unattended whenever I'm not. I don't know anything about true intimacy, so I don't know. But I do know this, that it definitely complicates relations in the home. After the few years with a sexaholic, alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. Then I think there's something wrong with her. My mind tells me, I wonder what's up with her. Well, it's because of my behavior is what's going on with her. Whether she knows or not, somewhere deep within she knows. Now, there's some things that we're about to read here. And, it's there again. It's hard to stick to the letter of the book right here, but I found that I had to because I was backed in a corner and nothing else had worked. So this is what happened for me. The husband begins to feel lonely and sorry for himself. That's dangerous for the alcoholic sexaholic. Dangerous place to be, to start feeling lonely and sorry for ourselves. Because here's what I done. I commenced to look around meetings. I commenced to look around the conferences that I was attended and invited to speak to. I started looking around the internets. I started looking around social media. I started doing all of that stuff for their equivalent, for something besides liquor, lust, acting out, whatever. Perhaps he's having a secret and exciting affair with a girl who understands. Now, I've had that experience, and I'm sure some of us have. In fairness, we must say that she may understand. She may, but she may not. But here's the deal. What am I going to do about a thing like that? Am I going to walk away from everything I know? And am I going to engage myself in the new relationship? Absolutely not. I wasn't there for any of that. I was there for selfish reasons. So, but here's what happened. A man so involved often feels very remorseful at times. And there were times whenever it just hit me in the stomach as hard as it could. I've got a beautiful wife at home, someone who is so loyal to me, that does anything that I ask her to do for the most part. I have seen her do things that no one has ever done. Wow. And there I was doing that kind of behavior and just couldn't stop it. The book says, especially if he's married to a loyal and courageous girl who has literally gone through hell for him. And that's where, for me, that's exactly what happened. Well, whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. And that's where I find myself. If we are sure a wife does not know, should we tell her? Not always, we think. My wife gets fighting mad whenever we read this part of the book together in a meeting, especially now. This is one thing that she told me. I don't care what the book says. I don't care what you think the book says. The deal is, and I was cornered 14 months ago. I was cornered, and I knew that it was coming out, not only to my wife, but it was coming out to the district. And on an international level, I was caught. she wanted to know the details. And I said, no, I can't tell you that. I can't. She wanted to know who they was, where they was, exactly like the book is describing right here. And so one of the things I said was exactly like this. In a general way, as long as you know that I've been walled, I really shouldn't tell him that was the wrong answer, buddy. She come alive. And I mean, she was very, very upset. And so much shame and so much heartbreak that night. I was just devastated, and so was she. And I told her, I said, okay, I mean, if that's what it's going to take, if that everything that I've ever been taught tells me not to do this, but if you want to know, then I will tell you. And it's going to be very ugly, I promise. And she said, I want to know. And I sat down and I told her. And about midway through it, she didn't want any more detail. She was done with it at that point. And I just felt like my life was over. But in reality, what had happened is I had surrendered completely during that. And I didn't even realize that had taken place. Very devastating. I never want to forget that day. God, please don't ever let me forget that day. Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. Well, I had more than a fault. I had a lot of faults. And here's what happened. She may insist on knowing the particulars. She'll want to know who the woman is and where she is. And she did. We felt we are to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. I tried that. Didn't work. We're sorry for what we have done. There it is again. We apologize, huh? We say we're sorry. In meetings, I heard you never say you're sorry. This book said it a couple of times here already. And God willing, it shall not be repeated. And I promise you, I did not say that to her. More than that, we cannot do. We have no right to go further. Now, there may be some justifiable exceptions. And though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we have often found this the best course to take. Yeah, it's very humbling. It's a very humbling step. Our design for living is not a one-way street. It is good for the wife. It is for the husband. I wasn't about to bring any of that up. If we can forget, so can she. It's better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy. And I understand that. I do. But that was already out. My situation was long beyond that. Perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. In other words, blunt honesty. And no outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. I can remember burning my sponsor's phone up, calling him over and over and over, man, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And he brought me to the sentence, I cannot appraise that kind of a situation. I've not had that experience, but I can tell you this, you need to be honest. Honest is always going to be your best policy. Just be honest, David, you're caught. Tell the truth for once in your life. Tell the truth. And that's what ended up happening. So it says that it may be that both will decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. That has happened, but it has taken some time. It didn't happen that day, I promise you. Now, each might pray about it. Now, there's a direction. Having the other's uppermost happiness in mind. Wow. Keep it always in sight that we're dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. And the things that I've seen happen then and since then, it is, it's been horrible, and then it's been forgiving at the same time. Good generalship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank rather than risk face-to-face combat. In other words, the flank, talking about from the side, it couldn't be attacked from the side rather than risk face-to-face combat. And it was beyond that. We were face-to-face. Time was up for sure. Well, the book says if we have no such complications, and many on here might not, well, there's plenty that we should do at home. Sometimes we hear an alcoholic, sexaholic, say that the only thing he needs to do is keep sober. For certainly he must keep sober. There'll be no home if he doesn't. That's one thing I talk about from day one. There's a difference between staying sober and recovering from the illness of alcoholism, sexaholism. There's a big difference here. If the only thing I need to do is stay sober, then all I need to do is not act out. But how do I live that way? How do I live with resentments and all this stuff that's coming at me? I don't have any tools to deal with that. So for me, in my situation, I can't stay sober. I never have been able to stay sober. So, but yet there is a long way from making good to the wife or parents from whom has so shockingly treated. That's definitely been the truth. Passing all understanding the patient mothers and wives have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, many of us would not have homes today, would perhaps be dead. But the alcoholic and the sexaholic is like this. We're like a tornado roaring through the lives of others. And for me, that was even sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was 25 years sober in AA. I was very active in the fellowship. I was very active in working the steps and doing this and doing that. And I'm still like a tornado roaring through the lives of others with lust and sexual acting out. I just can't stop. Hearts are broken. That happened a lot before I was even exposed. I mean, I'm a liar. I'm a cheat. I'm all of those things whenever I'm in my disease. And I don't have any idea. You see, I think that sexual acting out is my problem and I just can't stop it. I didn't realize that I'm dealing with lust over here. I had no idea about that. I should have. I ran around AA for years saying if alcohol is your problem, just don't drink it anymore and you shouldn't have a problem. Well, it's the same way over here. You know, if sexual acting out is the problem, just don't act out. It shouldn't be a problem, right? Now, when I stop doing that, something else shows up in the mind and it's very upset. Lust returns and I repeat it over and over and over. But the book says affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. A very important sentence for me right here. We feel a man is unthinking when he says sobriety is enough. Any guy that ever tells me all I need to do is stay sober, God will handle the rest of this, I will assure him right away he's on the wrong track. God will do for us what we cannot do for ourselves, but there's a whole lot of things we can do for ourselves. I can go to a meeting. I can pick up the phone. I can reach out. I can do some writing and inventory work. I can do what my sponsor suggests. I can do a whole lot of things. It's not all up to God. And I love what my brother Marty always says. Without God, I can't. Without me, he won't. And that's the truest statement that I've ever heard. So he's like the farmer who came up out of the cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. And to his wife, he remarked, don't see anything the matter here, Ma. And it grand, the wind stopped blowing. And that's kind of how I am when I come off of a lust binge. It's just kind of like, man, I don't understand what the big deal is. You know, that's over now. I mean, we're going to move on to better things. And no, it just doesn't quite work out that way, or it hadn't for me. So the book says this. There is a long period of reconstruction ahead. And that reconstruction is going to take place within me, not on the outside of me. When I'm not talking about building a new building, a shop building out here that'll make my wife happy. There are some things on the inside of me that is going to have to be reconstructed if I'm going to live a life as a recovering man in this program. And here it is. We must take the lead. I'm going to lead out on this. I have to make these amends. A remorseful mumbling that I'm sorry won't fit the bill at all. And I think that in the meetings, that's where a lot of people, they read that sentence and they think that we don't ever say we're sorry. No, the book says a remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fit the bill at all. It doesn't say that we should never say that we're sorry. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it. I've done that probably about a month ago, right whenever I got to a year. Sexual sobriety and SA, I sit down and I analyze the past as I now see it today. What you people have done in my life, how you have helped me, how you've prayed for me, how you've been there for me. And we agree today is the best decision ever made. My wife is very happy with where I'm at in my recovery today. So am I. And my passion today is to give this to my brother, no matter what. Being very careful to not criticize them. Absolutely none of this was their fault. In the past, I'd always sit down and say, well, you know, you were doing this during that time and you were doing that. I can remember I made amends to her one time through the years. And I really justified that amends because she had put up with some behavior out of her son and she didn't share that with me. She kept that from me because she knew that I was an idiot. I would probably act out and get very violent. So she didn't share that with me. And one of the times that I went and sat down with her, that was one of the things that I brought up, you know. When you done that to me, that really made me feel deeply wounded within. And so I had to withdraw. And and all this crap my ego comes up with, I don't need to do any of that. She doesn't even need to be discussed. This is my deal, not hers. You know, I'm the one. Her defects may be glaring, but look what the book says. The chances are that my own actions are partly responsible for that. And I'd say more than partly. So we clean house with the family. And here's a prayer that I use each day. I found myself changing as a result of saying this prayer. I never really said this prayer through the years. Asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. Never pity, but all of that. Man, what a beautiful prayer that is. And I tell you, you can't say that prayer every day and not change. It's just not possible. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. We hear in this program over and over and over, it works if you work it. It works if you work it. Work it, work it, work it. And that's true. You know, we do have to do work here. I'm not saying that. But the book says that we have to live it. That spiritual life is not a theory. If I want to be an example in front of other people, and I do today, then I have to live this, not just talk about it, not just show up here every Sunday, tell you what I've done, and go out there and live my life the way I want to the rest of the week. It doesn't work out that way for me. So unless one's family expresses a desire to live up on spiritual principles, we think we ought not urge them. In my last marriage, that was definitely the case. She was not grateful for my sobriety. She didn't want to go to Al-Anon. She didn't want to do any of this stuff, you know. So, you know, I was insistent about it. You need to do this. This is something you got to do. If you want our marriage to work, you got to do this and you got to do that. And the book says, no, don't ever do any of that. Unless they express a desire to live upon those principles, don't urge them. We shouldn't talk insistently to them about spiritual matters. In other words, let's show them. Let's don't tell them. Look at this promise. They will change in time. Man, that's beautiful. And this is why my behavior, not my words, my behavior will convince them more than my words ever would. I must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness and sexual acting out would make a skeptic out of anyone. There may be some wrongs that I can never fully right. I think I talked a little bit about that last week. My sponsor told me, David, there are some things that you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. Even though I've made amends to my wife, there are some things that I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my life. And one of the biggest ones today, and I shared this last week, was she pulled away from Alcoholics Anonymous and has never went back. She's vowed to never go back to another AA meeting because of what I did with the women she sponsored. The women around the group, I done it right in front of her nose, right in front of their nose. I did all of these things. And when that all came out, she was so ashamed. And that hurts me because she has a lot of recovery. She's been through this work in the book. I don't know how many times. There's so many people that she could help. But because of my actions, and now she won't even consider going. So, you know, that's something that I can't worry about today. I have to move on with my recovery. She has went back to the Fellowship of Al-Anon and works a very strong program there. And she has begun to attend some S-Anon as well. I'm very grateful for that. But the book says we don't worry about it if we could honestly say to ourselves that we would write them if we could. And I promise if there was anything that I could do to make that 100% right to bring her back, I would do that in a quick second. I would. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. When I was 9 months sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was coming up on a year. My sons had been taken away from me, rightfully so, because of my drinking and car wrecks and putting them in harm's way and all the time. They were taken away from me. And after I got into the program and I got sobered up and really looked like the program was going to take this time because it wasn't my first trip to that fellowship either. My ex-wife seen that it looked like I was going to be able to stay sober. And so she worked a deal with me. And the deal is that if I would stay sober when the summer came around, this was the summer before, she was talking about the next summer, that she would let me come to Indiana, pick up the kids, and that I'd be able to take them. And then we could begin to work through me having a relationship with my sons again. There was two of them. One was 6 and one was 7, or one was 5 and one was 7. And so I went all the way through that year, working the program, staying sober, had some good sponsorship in my life, was really taken to this way of life. And about 1 week before I was to go get the 2 boys, Memorial Day weekend, I was going to get them the next week. I think, in fact, just the next few days. I got a call that my youngest son had drowned in Lake Monroe, Indiana, at a Labor Day event that they were at. Indiana gets a lot of flooding during that time of the year, and it had flooded, and there were 2 guys there, and, you know, they had the boys up on their shoulders, and they were just out having fun in the water, and they tried to walk to a picnic table that might have been 15 feet away, and a undercurrent got him and pulled him under, and the little one was fighting for his life, and he just didn't make it. He went under and he drowned, and the guy that had him on his shoulder, he kept going down trying to get him and trying to get him, and he drowned as well, trying to save my son. And so there were 2 lives that were lost there that day. And man, I was just devastated. I was heartbroken, so mad at God, so mad at God. It was his fault this had happened. He got me sober just long enough to let me see what happens when you don't get sober. And I had all this craziness going on in my mind, but absolutely none of that was true. And so when we came through this part of the book, one of my questions all along is, how am I ever going to be able to make amends to this boy? He's not here now. Thank God for the directions in this book. Some people cannot be seen, and I'll never see him again on this side for sure. But the book says we send an honest letter. And so that's what I ended up doing. In the amends, I sat down and I wrote a letter. I prayed. I asked for God's guidance. I burnt sweet grass and sage, and I used a feather to do the smudging. And I was able to write the letter, and it was very powerful. And with some other things I did with that as well, I was able to heal. And what a beautiful experience that's turned out to be. Coming to SA 14 months ago, there were some women that I'd hurt through the years that I was willing to make amends. I seen them whenever I wrote inventory. They showed up on my A-step list, and I was willing to make these amends. I was. And whenever I started seeking out and asking around about them, I found out that a few of them were dead now. They died during the disease, and, you know, some had died from the disease of sexaholism even. We don't think this won't take us out. We're sadly mistaken it will. That lifestyle is very deadly, or it was for them. And so anyway, I sat down and I had to do this again. I had to write several letters, and I did that. I went to a Native American sweat ceremony, and my elder gave me some time alone. He walked away after we finished the ceremony that day. And I was able to sit there in the woods and to read that letter out loud. I was able to say a prayer and ask for forgiveness, expressing that I was sorry. Where the rocks had been burnt, I chunked the letters into the fire, threw some sweet sage on top of it, and the smoke going up signified that I'd turned that over to the Creator. I walked away that day feeling forgiven, feeling healed. This is a very, very powerful way to make amends to those who are no longer with us. So the fact that they're dead doesn't mean we're off the hook with this. There's work for us to do in amends, even with those. I'll finish up here. There may be some valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, humble, without being servile or scraping. One of the things I say about my amends, and I tell my guys from day one, we're not doing anything illegal or immoral. We're not doing anything servile or scraping. We're just not doing that. If it comes to that, deal's off. As God's people, we stand on our own feet. We don't crawl before anyone, and I just don't do that today. I've found a way to be free here. I'm so grateful for my sobriety and for the recovery that's been given to me. I love you guys. I'm so grateful that you come out today. Thank you so much for that. Next week, we're going to be looking at the 9-step promises, going into step 10. Powerful, powerful information that it gives us there. It really is. I hear a lot of people say that all the time, the promises. There's a lot of promises in this book. Gosh, there's promises on every page that we've been through over these weeks. These are the 9th step promises. They are not the promises of the program. They're the 9th step promises. So we'll definitely be taking a close look at that, and really glad to be here today. Thank you for letting me share. And Dennis, thank you for your service, brother. Love you.